and I heard the penny was being discontinued, it brought me right back to my childhood, sitting cross-legged on the floor, peeking into an old box of my father's collectibles when he was young. It felt like looking into my father's life as a kid. There was one coin that always stood out to me, the half penny. It wasn't made anymore, and that made it feel rare and important. And so my hobby of collecting pennies started. My parents were born and raised in New York City, Lower East Side, 7th Street, between 1st and 2nd Avenues to be exact, at different times and different eras for sure. Growing up, Mom's apartment was quite spacious, especially compared to my dad's. Getting to the apartment where my dad grew up required climbing straight up 4 flights of stairs, so steep that even as a young kid visiting my grandparents, it caused me to huff and puff. There was no elevator. The apartment was small, and I mean tiny. 2 bedrooms, a small living room, a little kitchen, and no bathroom. The bathroom was in the hall and shared by the 2 other families who lived on the same floor. My 2 aunts shared 1 bedroom, my dad and uncle shared the other, and my grandparents had the living room. Dad's room was just large enough for 2 beds and a dresser. That was it. My dad kept his tiny secrets in a shoebox type carton in the bottom drawer of the chest. One of my father's precious wonders was a half penny, officially called a half cent, first minted in 1793 and last produced in 1857. Made of copper, it was the smallest denomination ever minted in the United States, used for everyday purchases when even a single cent held real value. Over time, inflation made it obsolete, and by 1857, the U.S. Mint discontinued it altogether. One of the questions I always had as a kid, looking through that box of collectibles, feeling like I was sneaking a peek into a treasure chest, was why my father hadn't saved more half pennies. I asked mainly because they weren't made anymore, and to me, that made them especially precious. But when my father was young, it was a different, harder time. When Dad was young, the family was just getting by, and holding on to just one felt like all he could manage. His response was always the same. Not sad, not bitter, but quietly grateful. We needed those pennies to pay the bills. As I said before, it was another time, another world. Now grown, I reasoned one day, the penny would no longer be minted. I didn't want to be asked why I hadn't kept more pennies when I grew older, married, and had children. Lucky enough to have the means to pay my bills, I decided to start saving pennies in earnest for my grandchildren. And so it began. Saving pennies, but that's not all. I decided to pick up one of those giant crayon banks, and before I even had grandchildren, started writing notes of encouragement, noting essential family events, and then putting in pennies and nickels. I used the bank as a time machine for them to have at a later date. Today, I cultivated 5 of these ongoing time machines, one for each of my grandkids. Others have been filled over time and sealed, each with a grandchild's name on it, and they are to open them on their 21st birthdays. What's in them, you ask? I don't even know at this point. A lot of pennies and nickels, that's for sure, but also words of wisdom. What I've written is not only from a grandfather to his grandchildren, but from my heart. Among the pennies and nickels are hopes for them to never give up on their dreams, that with hard work they can accomplish anything they set out to do, respect themselves and others, and enjoy life with all it has to offer.